Let's talk about the problem of evil. The problem of evil is an argument in favor of atheism. The problem of evil is giving you an argument whose conclusion is that you should not believe in the existence of an all-powerful, all-loving, all-good God. Basically, the problem of evil is saying that evil is incompatible with God. So one of them's got to go. And since we know that there's evil, we've got to get rid of our idea that God exists. But that's like such a watered down version of the problem of evil. So let's break it down. First of all, you know I put God in square quotes, and that's got to mean something, right? Yes, it sure does. So let's go there first. Let's talk about what we mean by God. So there's this question, do you believe in God? Do you believe that there is such thing as a God? A theist is someone who says, yes, I believe in a supernatural being that deserves my praise, which is somehow some kind of creator or somehow in charge. Now, a monotheist is someone who believes that there is only one such entity, that there is one God and only one God. A polytheist is someone who believes that there's more than one God, that there are gods, or who believes in one God but then is open to the idea of there being other gods. And the problem of evil is an argument against monotheism, against the idea that there is one and only one God and he is all good, which is omnibenevolent, and that he is omnipotent, which means that he is able to do anything, and that he is omniscient, which means that he knows everything. Now, that's more than just monotheism. Monotheism is basically the idea that there's only one God, one and only one God. But people who are monotheists, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Zoroastrians, also believe in this really robust definition of God. That God is all good, all powerful, all knowing, all loving, all able, all this. It's called the Omni-god definition. So the problem of evil is responding to this kind of definition of God. So when we say that the problem of evil is basically that evil is incompatible with God, by God we've got this definition in mind. So the theist is saying God exists, I believe in God, and they have a very particular idea of what they mean by God. The problem of evil responds to that critically and says, hold on. If you believe in such God, you have some explaining to do. Why is there all this evil in the world? How is it possible that there is evil and you think that this God exists? So we don't need to go into details about what's wrong with the world. That might get too political. But I've thrown on this flashcard some examples of some things that probably most people would say is suffering or pain or evil or wrongdoing or being wronged. There's a ton of examples that you might come up with that are not on this card. But don't you agree with me that evil exists? The argument called the problem of evil says evil exists. Now, whatever you have in mind when you say evil exists, that's up to you. So here's Mackie's version of the problem of evil. He says, first of all, evil exists. There is excessive evil. Second of all, you believe in some omnipotent God. Third of all, you believe in some all-good God. And one of those has to be wrong. There is no God, Mackie says, who is all good and all able if there is evil. So evil, he says, is incompatible with your definition of God. So either you're going to say God doesn't exist or you're going to say evil doesn't exist. Hopefully you're going to agree that God doesn't exist. Now we've got a really clear way of understanding what Mackie has in mind by turning back to the 300 BC. Now notice that's 300 years before the year 0. And Jesus was supposed to be preaching when he was about 30, about the year 30 something. So this predates Christianity by a long shot. It's not necessarily the Christian God that we're objecting to. But here's his statement. I'm just going to read the card. If God is willing to prevent evil, but he is not able, then he is not omnipotent. If God is able to prevent evil, but is not willing, then God is not all good, omnibenevolent. If God is both willing and able, then there should not be evil. If your God exists, if your God who is all good and all powerful exists, then there would be no evil. But there is evil, so your God does not exist. Here's a totally different way to put the argument, which comes from Rowe. He says, imagine that a lightning strike goes off and it catches a forest on fire. So the lightning comes down, a tree catches on fire, the forest catches on fire. There's a little cute baby deer inside of that forest, a fawn. And that fawn gets super badly burned, but doesn't die right away. The fawn is like laying around in agony for a few days before it finally dies. What good came out of that? Why did that need to happen? That sounds like suffering that was preventable. Like if you could just get that deer out of the forest. It sounds like evil that was unnecessary. Like, why did that need to happen? It didn't. And if you're telling me you've got a God who knows everything, he knows what's going to happen, and he's able to do anything, he could get that deer out of the forest, and that he's all good, meaning he's got all the motivation necessary to make good come about, then there wouldn't be this baby deer getting third-degree burns and laying there suffocating and in agony, unable to move, unable to eat for days before it dies. Like, that sounds like an evil that was preventable and unnecessary, and that just wouldn't be if there was a God who created everything, who is all good, who is all able. But we've got unnecessary pain. We've got preventable pain. So the problem of evil is an objection to the theist who believes that an all-good, all-powerful God exists. So if you are giving arguments in favor of God, and there are lots of different arguments in favor of God, you've got now an argument in favor of atheism. The problem of evil argues that you should not believe in an all-powerful, all-good God because evil exists.